A soggy Saturday night in the capital area is the backdrop for college lacrosse's most played rivalry. Meeting number 107 between the Blue Jays of Johns Hopkins and the Maryland Terrapins. Two of the nation's top four close out the college lacrosse Saturday in the home of the Terps, College Park. Welcome to Old Spice ESPNU College Lacrosse. Thankfully, the rain has gone away, at least for now, in College Park, setting the stage for number 3 Johns Hopkins versus number 4 Maryland from Byrd Stadium. I'm Carter Blackburn with former Syracuse All-American midfielder Paul Carcaterra. Meeting number 107 between these two, and a lot of times in these long-played rivalries, it can seem like ancient history. Not between these two. This is very much a present-day rivalry.
This is the greatest rivalry in all of college lacrosse. Two programs that do not like each other, and the roots are deep, dating back to 1895. Put history aside, two of the hottest teams in the nation, with the winner most likely locking up a coveted top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Now, one of the reasons Maryland is in the top 4, a veteran team, one of those veterans who has really begun to explode is Ryan Young.
Well, he's the heartbeat of the Terps team. Coach Tillman describes him as one of the hardest workers he's ever been around. He leads Maryland in points. He's a dual-threat attackman. His specialty, setting up teammates with pinpoint passes and shooting efficiency. He cans 46% of his shots. One of the major player development stories of this season has been Hopkins sophomore goalie Pierce Bassett. He's catapulted the Jays with his stopping ability. Currently top 3 in the nation in save percentage and goals against. He's even-keeled, poised, big game tested, and is a legitimate first-team All-American candidate.
Take a look at a couple more of the Warrior Impact players.
John Ranigan, brute force and an endless motor defines the super sophomore's game. He's outstanding at dodging the opposition. He could separate from anyone. And Nico Amato, quickly establishing himself as one of the nation's elite goaltenders. The freshman with ridiculously quick hands has taken over games this season.
Maryland takes the field here at Byrd Stadium, and they are glad that they get to play this one. Mentioned the rain and the storms that have been rolling through the capital area. There was some question as to whether this game was going to be delayed, but we are on time for meeting number 107 between these two, and the last couple have been really good games, including the 10-9 Maryland win over Johns Hopkins, first win in the series for the Terps since '06. That game was at M&T Bank Stadium, home of the Baltimore Ravens. Among the memorable games in this series, the 1973 national title game. Maryland beat Johns Hopkins 10-9 for Maryland's first NCAA title. Dave Petramala knows about this rivalry. He told us this week he was pretty close to being a Maryland Terrapin, and then was recruited to Johns Hopkins, where he is now in his 11th season as the Hopkins head coach, with 2 national titles under his belt. And for Maryland, it's first-year head coach John Tillman, 3 years at Harvard. Beat Princeton last year in a landmark game for Harvard lacrosse. Beat Duke in 2009. And his Terps, Paul, have won at Virginia and at Navy since the 11-6 loss that we saw here to North Carolina.
Well, that was a huge game, a turnaround-type game. UNC completely controlled tempo from start to finish. Says a lot about the character of the Terps and Coach Tillman, how they were able to rebound on the road at Charlottesville. It was a marquee win. I think you'll look back at this season, turning point.
John Tillman that talks freely about his admiration for Dave Petramala. Of course, one of the games, Petramala, one of the great defensive players in the game, one of the great defensive minds in the game. John Tillman said, yeah, we used a lot of his stuff, especially at Harvard. Wasn't quite saying that he's using as much of Dave Petramala's schemes here as the head coach of the Maryland Terrapins. As you would expect between two of the nation's top 4 teams, 2 excellent face-off units. Johns Hopkins second in the nation. Curtis Holmes, the sophomore, winning 62% of his face-offs. Maryland 60% on the year with a couple of long pulls off the wings. And the battle for the first face-off is won by Johns Hopkins. So, Paul, what do you expect to see out of third-ranked Johns Hopkins tonight against Maryland.
This is a team that's matured much quicker than any lacrosse expert would have thought. 8 out of 10 starters, freshmen or sophomores. Big game experience. You look at the job, Coach Petramala, Coach Dwan, and Benson, this staff, incredible perspective on how to handle these young bucks.
And an excellent first midfield line. John Rannigan, John Greeley, and Rob Guido. 29 goals from that first midfield unit.
2 sophomores and a freshman. If you're coaching against the Jays, you have to deal with these guys for years to come. You look at their defense on the other side. 2 sophomores and a freshman as well.
It's a Johns Hopkins offense that is averaging 11 goals a game, and a turnover on the first possession as we see the first slip. Wharton slips on the turf, and you can just take a look at the Byrd Stadium turf and see that the wear and tear of lacrosse and now overlapping with spring football and rains today, although the tarp was on the field up until an hour before face-off time, but still, the playing surface could be a factor tonight.
If they didn't have the tarp here today, this surface would be unplayable. It's coming down hard all day. Facility crews working hard to get this game in.
Take a look at our keys to the game for Maryland.
Catalino touches. The senior sniper has been quiet as of late. 4 goals total in the last 4 games. When the Terps are moving the ball quickly and hitting on transition, number 1 in white will get his opportunity. And Amato needs to trigger transition. One of the best clearing goalies in college lacrosse. Quick passes off saves from Amato forces up tempo for the Terps.
Maryland 8-2 on the season, as is Johns Hopkins. Wins at Virginia, at Navy, to get back on track after the loss to North Carolina. Here is Grant Catalino, his first touch. Dodging in, draws 3 Johns Hopkins defenders, and a turnover forced by Johns Hopkins. Bill Castronova, the freshman short stick D-midi, gets the takeaway. And then a loose ball push will give it right back to Johns Hopkins.
On that last touch by Catalino, trying to go through the heart of that Dave Petramala defense. That's not happening. He's a defensive mastermind, driving through the middle and beating the core of that defense. Not an option for Catalino.
Take a look at our keys to the game for the Blue Jays.
Well, the Jays need to support Delente. The senior's been incredible, winning almost 70% at the face-off X. But Hopkins has not seen wing play like Maryland, which can offset Delente's dominance in creating from the midfield. The Jays playmakers are in that unit, initiating from up top, scoring opportunities from this unit, as well as hitting the finishers on the attack.
Johns Hopkins brings its second midfield unit on with Lee Coppersmith, the sophomore from Florida, who has been terrific the last couple of games. Wins over Virginia and North Carolina the last Friday in Albany. He had 3 goals versus UVA, and then the game winner over North Carolina. And yet Johns Hopkins turns it over again. 2 offensive possessions for the Blue Jays, 2 turnovers.
The Jays, a microcosm of the growth of lacrosse nationally. Their starting goaltender from the state of Arizona. Lee Coppersmith hails from Florida. They call him Crazy Legs because of his speed. Spoke to Coach Dwan about him in the past. They love Coppersmith.
Transition opportunity for Maryland. The shot goes wide from Kevin Cooper. But you will see Maryland, and this is part of the game plan. John Tillman says, we are at our best offensively when we're scoring in transition.
Well, the Terps have those 2-way midfielders. Drew Snyder, Landon Carr, and the long poles. The combination of Jesse Barnhart and Brian Farrell. Not a better combo long pole unit in the nation.
Brian Farrell, long stick midi, has 7 goals on the season, 4 assists.
Need to put that in perspective when you think about Farrell. There's no midfielder on the Syracuse second line that has over 3 goals. A guy like Farrell just starts transition, instant offense when he has the ball.
Maryland averaging 12 goals a game. Johns Hopkins giving up about 6.5 goals a game. That's 3rd in the nation. Hofstra is actually number 1. Mike Gavazin, the great goalie for the Pride. Catalino drawing the short stick for now in Tim Donovan. So keep an eye on number 1 for Maryland behind the cage, and now Catalino's going to try and get some space. Instead, the feed and a score for Maryland. Joe Cummings gets the goal, and Maryland strikes first.
Cummings, the craftiest shooting midfielder in the country. You look at his numbers, 21 goals on the season. Take a look here, the quarterback, Ryan Young. I mentioned in the open, when he distributes, the Terps hit on all cylinders. And you want it in 19th stick right here. Cummings, a high school attackman, so crafty around that crease area. Reminds me of the great Matt Posque, Virginia All-American 2006. Mid-range shooter, can play the crease, can shoot in space.
Just like you draw it up for Maryland, Young gets the assist. That's 16 for him on the season, leading assist man for the Terps. And Joe Cummings is the leading goal scorer for Maryland. His 21st goal of the season. So Catalino has 19. Cummings now has 21. That's a goal. And it's 2-0 Maryland. That ball went right through the net. The goal is good, and Maryland leads 2-0. Landon Carr gets the goal.
I've only seen that twice this season. In recent years, not at all. Chris LaPierre from Virginia did it the Face-Off Classic in Baltimore, and that's not even that hard of a shot. Landon Carr just sets his feet. Get a better look right here. It's a nice shot by Carr, but certainly not the level that will rip a net.
So 8 seconds between goals from Cummings and Carr to make it 2-0 Maryland, ripping the back of the net. Time to get the what do you call when you what do you call those little the tines, the
call them in lacrosse the zip ties, little cable ties.
Yeah.
I don't want to rain on Landon Carr's parade.
I was thinking of like the knitting needles. I guess that's
yeah,
the knitting needles.
When you rip a net, it's a Herculean effort.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Paul. He rips the net and gets the goal, and you said it wasn't that hard of a shot.
Not saying there's a weak spot in the net, but got to think.
So you know Dave Petromala is not happy with the defensive start for Johns Hopkins, or really the start on both ends. A couple of turnovers by the Blue Jays, and then a pair of goals in 8 seconds to make it 2-0 Maryland on Johns Hopkins.
There it is right there, zip ties. Cleaning that net up.
No knitting needles needed. 4.5 minutes into this game, Johns Hopkins does not have a shot. Maryland has 2 goals. So back to the face-off X. Matt Delente, the nation's leader, 70%, had 16 face-off wins in the victory over North Carolina. Out it pops, ground ball scooped by Johns Hopkins. Blue Jays get it. Delente gets the ground ball, but Johns Hopkins gives it right back.
The legal procedure right there during the face-off until possession. You can't leave that restraining box area if you're an attackman or defender. Wharton looks like he crossed that line.
Maryland uses its first midfield unit now with Snyder, Cummings, and Bernhardt. Jake Bernhardt. Brother Jesse, a long stick midi for Maryland. And the Terps are coming out firing. That one's off the side of the net on another hard shot. This one from Ryan Young. Hopkins still doesn't have a shot.
Big possession for the Jays. They're going to long pole Ranigan, number 31 in black. He's getting all the attention, having a first-team All-American type season. Line mate John Greeley with the ball right now has to exploit the short sticks to get midfield success for Hopkins.
Rannigan, 31, the sophomore from Yorktown, New York. The top scoring midi with 13 goals, 9 assists. And here is Rannigan drawing the pole. Good dodge from Guido. Palmer nearly lost it behind the cage, but manages to recover.
Looks like Palmer getting matched up against a short stick. Tackman normally going against the poles.
That shot appeared to be deflected from Wharton, and now a ground ball flipped back across the field. We'll see if Palmer can dig it out. Palmer hits the turf. Maryland can't control. Good play by Max Schmidt to get to the ground ball. One way or another anyway. Recovering, and now Maryland on the run. Jesse Bernhardt clears it. Terps attack in transition.
See on the backside right there, Owen Bly. You'll see him and the senior Travis Reed platooning at that third attack spot with Catalino and Young. Owen Bly, only a sophomore, but's had some big games. That Virginia game a couple weeks ago, he was finishing those transition type plays for Maryland.
Had a pair of goals in the win over Navy. Soft shot by Cummings, saved by Bassett, his first. So the sophomore from Scottsdale, Arizona, gets the first save of the night for Johns Hopkins. Yet again, you go back to the number 5 shots by Maryland, 2 goals, 0 shots by Johns Hopkins. 1 shot now by Johns Hopkins.
Based on that first possession, the real true possession for Johns Hopkins, it looks like all the playmaking attention defensively from Maryland is going towards Hopkins midfielders. The Blue Jays attackmen need to really take advantage of any mismatches, putting short sticks below where they typically get guarded by long poles. Those Hopkins attackmen have to be dodgers.
So this is Mark Goodrich with the second midfield unit who sets up the inverted offense behind the cage. Goodrich, a senior from Massachusetts. Goodrich draws the slide. Max Schmidt comes out.
Goodrich used to operating behind the cage. A high school attackman, was a standout in the New England area, one of the top recruits in the country. Hasn't had the numbers offensively, but he's really fitting into his role in his senior campaign.
Palmer trying to feed. This is Lee Coppersmith. Coppersmith checked by the All-American Brian Farrell. Johns Hopkins is on the board with the first goal of the night for the Blue Jays.
Textbook offense for Johns Hopkins. Maryland sliding real quickly. Eric Rule, the freshman, has been injured as of late. Back in the lineup, you see the slide. Boland, the senior, recognizes that. Hits behind, so Maryland needs to rotate to that backside. You even see the finger pointing by Brian Farrell saying you have to come over. 37 in white. That's what you want on offense. Draw the double, kick it behind, hit the backside, that opposite side. That's where you'll find a vulnerable spot in the defense. Smart offensive play by Johns Hopkins.
Rule gets the goal. Zach Palmer has his team leading 16th assist. And a face-off win by Johns Hopkins. So Blue Jays get on the board. and win the ensuing faceoff.
Galente, a major story in college lacrosse this year. Absolutely dominating faceoff play. You want to be over 50%. This kid is almost at 70%. He's an average faceoff man the last couple years, saving his best for last in his senior year.
Even right now in the faceoff match between Johns Hopkins and Maryland, 2-2. And if you're new to the sport of lacrosse or just checking in, you can't score unless you don't have the ball. So therefore, faceoff's critical for possession, especially in the sport without a shot clock. That pass just a little bit wide from Rannigan.
I always say faceoff and goaltending: create runs, prevent runs.
ESPNU's coverage of Old Spice College lacrosse continues with a Warrior Classic on Saturday, 3 Eastern. It's UMass versus Hofstra. Then 5:30 Eastern, Rutgers versus Syracuse. The Warrior Classic lacrosse on ESPNU Saturday. A chance to ask you, Paul Carcaterra, the former All-American midfielder and goal scorer, what is going on with Syracuse's offense?
It's been lethargic at best. Lacking perimeter dodgers. They've scored 6 or less goals 3 times this season. That's unheard of.
Yeah, against Johns Hopkins in that odd game at the Carrier Dome on March 19th. 5-4 in double overtime. Syracuse over Johns Hopkins. I mean, double overtime between Hopkins and Syracuse. You would think that it would be an explosive scoring game, at least on one side, but 5-4, and Syracuse wins that game. I also think 5-4 favors Johns Hopkins. But we had a good conversation with Dave Petromal this week on our conference call with him on Thursday about perceptions about slowing down and playing methodical as to what the reality actually is.
The reality for this Johns Hopkins team, they're not slow down anymore. I've watched this team week in and week out. When they get transition opportunities, they go. They have the horses at the midfield, defensive midfielders who could handle the ball.
Now, they expected to see transition this week. In fact, Petromala said they did a lot of 7-on-6 drills. 7 offensive players, 6 defensive players, just to get his defense ready to matching up in transition and not matching up one-on-one, so you don't leave anybody accountable. That went off Catalino's stick. Round ball in front of the cage, scooped by Ben Smith.
Preseason in the ACC, everyone was talking about UVA in North Carolina. Hopkins beats both of them, scoring double-digit goals. No slowdown in Baltimore.
The 7th Johns Hopkins possession. As you can see, 4 have ended in turnovers, 1 in a goal. Goodrich in the 2nd Johns Hopkins midfield. Cobbersmith, good dodge, draws the slide. Boland, the senior from Jessup, Maryland. Boys Latin turns the corner, but misses. Wharton there to get the ground ball. Wharton checked from behind and lost it near the cage. Dan Burns strips it from Kyle Wharton.
Those 2 last shooting opportunities for the Blue Jays, Boland and Wharton, I thought those were forced. Poor angles, kick the ball behind, find the midfield short stick matchups. Beauty of this game, strength on strength. Maryland and their defensive midfielders, Farrell and Barnhart, short sticks, and guys like Dan Burns against this Hopkins midfield.
Farrell nearly got another chance in front of the cage. In fact, he stays down there with the long pole. And now finally Farrell will head back to the defensive end. And Jake Bernhardt with the first Maryland midfield back onto the field. Seconds winding down in the first quarter. It was a 2-0 start for Maryland, and they add the third goal with just 11 seconds remaining in the first quarter. Drew Snyder pumps home goal number 3 of the first quarter, just the 8th of his junior season.
Seattle's best, Drew Snyder. Great recognition. A midfielder inverting, taking his defense out of their element behind the cage as opposed to up top. Good low angle awareness by Snyder.
A Johns Hopkins defense that's giving up only 6.5 goals on average this season has allowed Maryland 3 in the first quarter. 6 shots, 3 goals. The Terps shooting 50% in the first quarter against one of the nation's top defenses. Meeting number 107 between the Blue Jays and the Terps is off to a red-hot start for the team in red and white. John Tillman's Maryland Terrapins. Cummings gets the scoring started. Then it's Carr and Snyder, and a 3-1 lead for Maryland at the end of one. North of the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., we are in College Park, Maryland, home of the Terps, who have a 3-1 lead as we begin the second quarter. And Paul, a chance to look at some lacrosse headlines from around the country.
It's been rivalry week. Duke beats Virginia by 2. Can't say enough about the coaching job John Danowski has done with the Blue Devils after losing so many people. Injuries, guys like Holman and Stanwyck nicked up. Matt Lovejoy and Jack McBride out for the season. Huge losses for those two squads. You look at the conference races, Cornell strangleholding the Ivy to CAA. That's really anyone's. The most intriguing conference. Hofstra the leader, but Penn State, Drexel, UMass, and Delaware all capable.
How about the triple overtime game? UMass versus Drexel. The game-winning goal from Kyle Smith in that third overtime.
I like UMass's sophomore attackman, Willie Manny, about 5'7", but lightning quick in Denver. Coach Tierney has arrived out west.
Carter Blackburn with former Syracuse All-American midfielder Paul Carcaterra from Byrd Stadium in College Park, Maryland. Our hardworking ESPNU crew on what was a rainy, at times thundering and lightning Saturday here in the capital region, but thankfully it's dried out for us to get this one in, beginning on time at 8 o'clock Eastern time. College lacrosse's most played rivalry back to 1895. And if you're ready for the feeling a little bit older moment, speaking with Kyle Wharton the other day, he said, yeah, I remember growing up when they played the 100th game between Maryland and Johns Hopkins. That was 2004, 7 years ago, as Kyle, who is now a senior in college, said, yeah, growing up, I remember that game.
I remember that game, but I was old already. That was a special one. They came back with the 100-year anniversary jerseys. Remember Hopkins auctioning off those jerseys for charity. Guys like Chris Watson, Kyle Harrison, all part of that championship team in 2005. An undefeated run for the Blue Jays.
Good feed and an even better save by Nico Amato, his first to begin the second quarter, stonewalling Chris Boland. What a save from the freshman Amato. A redshirt freshman, Amato, in goal for Maryland. He's from Pennsylvania. Conshohocken, PA. Pierce Bassett, a sophomore, in goal for Johns Hopkins, and yet that one sneaks by him. And there is Maryland in transition. Joe Cummings has his second goal for the Terps in a 4-1 lead for Maryland.
I said one of the keys, Amato triggering transition. It has to start with a save. He gets it out, and Cummings, the best shooting midfielder in college lacrosse, keeps his angle and just snipes this one to the far pipe. inside on Bassett. Look at the location on this shot. Old school overhand, Joe Cummings. 22nd of the season. You scored 20 goals for a season, you've arrived. Cummings will be up near 30 by the time this season is over.
Timeout, Johns Hopkins. 4-1 Terps. Big loss for the Johns Hopkins lacrosse family and for all of college lacrosse as Jeff Cook, 1982 Johns Hopkins graduate, passed away this week. Lacrosse Hall of Famer, 2 NCAA titles, National Player of the Year, and with all of the tributes about Jeff Cook this week, the one word you hear from his teammates and those who played against him was the toughness at which he played the attack position.
Great dodging attackman, 6th all-time career points at Johns Hopkins. Turnbull Award given to the top attackman in the country. Cook claimed that twice, in a Hall of Fame inductee in 2006. Tremendous loss for the Johns Hopkins lacrosse community and his family. I had a poster of Jeff Cook over my bed when I was a kid.
On the field here at College Park, meeting number 107 between Maryland and Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins, of course, in Baltimore, just up the road, so a very familiar rivalry. Both schools recruit from all over the country, but there's a familiarity when you're in the popular sport in the Baltimore, D.C. area, and you're two programs with a lot of pride and tradition. And as such, a pair of one-goal games going each way the last 2 times these teams met.
Tons of classics over the 107 years. You look at the dynamic of this rivalry. Small school in Johns Hopkins. Maryland, the big state school. Both programs claiming multiple national titles. They really battled in the 1970s for national titles, and their stake is college lacrosse's finest.
You know, it's interesting when you talk to both programs, they say absolutely rivalry game. For Johns Hopkins, with all of the national titles, there's rivalries. Dave Petromala says, yeah, well, you know, when he was playing at Johns Hopkins, it was probably Syracuse because they were neck and neck for national titles in the 70s. Hopkins, Maryland, a big-time rivalry in those championship games. Johns Hopkins versus Princeton, but no matter who is at the top in college lacrosse, Maryland Johns Hopkins has always had a special feel to it. Well, this year, 3 versus 4, and as you mentioned, Paul, I mean, a national seed potentially on the line as Pierce Bassett makes the save. This is not just about history. This is about 2 of the top programs in college lacrosse, 2 national title contenders in 2011.
The winner of this game, for all intents and purposes, because of the resumes and quality wins, will lock up a top 4 spot, and that's huge in college lacrosse. That's a home game in the first round. There's no cupcakes anymore. You get down to that 14, 15, 16 ranked team in the playoffs. That's a formidable foe.
Up next for Maryland, it's the ACC tournament, which will take place in Durham at Duke. But there's no automatic bid to the NCAA from the ACC. There's only 4 teams who play in the ACC. So you would say, well, there's no NCAA implications, except that, again, seeding potentially a factor when the ACC teams get together. Duke clearly the front runner in the ACC this season and hosting the tournament.
And they easily could stub their toe against a Virginia, Carolina, or a Maryland. The rest of those squads 1 and 2 in conference. So the seeding yet to be determined. It's going to have to be a goals against type seeding for those squads, as they're all 1 and 2 and have beaten each other.
Rannigan creates off the dodge. This is Palmer, who is stripped, and another Johns Hopkins turnover. Blue Jays 20 minutes into this game, only 4 shots.
We mentioned up tempo, making me eat my words here.
Amato turns it over, and then the empty goal score for Johns Hopkins. So The Blue Jays riding hard, anticipating that Maryland transition, get the takeaway from Amato on the pass, and turn it into an open goal score.
Amato, typically his passes result into Terp goals, not the opposition. Palmer with a steady stick right there just launches this one about the 45-yard line.
So Palmer gets the goal. Zach Palmer with the, would you say that's a pick six? The interception at midfield and then all the way down to the goal?
Why not?
The sophomore from Ontario who has really upped his numbers in his sophomore season. Didn't play an awful lot as a freshman, but only 10 goals as a freshman. That is goal number 15 already for Palmer in his sophomore season.
And he had the transition a year ago, playing a lot of midfield and from Canada, so not accustomed to the field game, but his sophomore year, 30 points on the year already. Certainly making his mark.
And shooting over 50%.
Tackman on this field tonight. Palmer and Ryan Young shoots at 47%. You shoot at 30%, that's good.
Coppersmith in the second midfield line. Coppersmith winds up. Amato makes the stick save. Not shy as soon as Amato makes the save. The outlet pass and the Terps going left to right again. Scott LaRue clears it for Maryland.
You know, Carter, you mentioned this rivalry. The difference between Hopkins, Syracuse, and Hopkins, Virginia, maybe for the players of the last 10, 15 years, it's significant. But when you bring back alumni who are 60, 70 years old, the one team they think about, if you're Hopkins, it's Maryland. If you're Maryland, it's Hopkins. So the roots of this rivalry deeper than any other.
I touched on it earlier, but Dave Petramala, the Johns Hopkins legend, said, yeah, even growing up in Queens, New York, he was a big fan of Maryland basketball. Those were in the days Lefty Drizel, the Lynn Bias, and those great teams. So Cole Fieldhouse rocking as Bird Stadium begins to rock again. Jake Bernhardt with the bounce shot goal. Maryland comes up with the answer.
One of the best two-way midfielders in the nation. Offensive numbers don't really pop out with 10 goals on the season, but this kid does everything. Little hesitation dodge right there. Lulls the defender to sleep. Hitches, goes straight down the pipe and sticks it past Bassett.
Five-2 Terps, another timeout. College softball. Carter Blackburn with Paul Carcaterra, both bands on hand. Kind of a shame this rain came along. I mean, it was a very stormy day here in the Baltimore, D.C. area, the capital area. So not quite as many fans as you'd usually see for Johns Hopkins in Maryland, but they got the sweatshirts and the rain gear on. And yeah, that'll tell you exactly how spirited the crowd is on a Saturday night.
Good weather, I think they probably would have had in the 15,000 range.
Face-off win for Maryland. Bernhardt comes charging in, and it's 6-2 Terps. Jesse Bernhardt gets this goal. Brother Jake scores, and Jesse follows up to make it 6-2 Maryland. Right off the face-off win.
I mentioned wing play could offset Delente's dominance. When you have 36 and 37 in white, roaming the wings with the long poles, who could start offense. The Terps loving it.
The Bernhardt brothers scored 9 seconds apart. Older brother Jake with an unassisted goal. Then on the ensuing faceoff, Jesse gets his 4th career goal, 2nd of the season for the Bernhardt brothers from Longwood, Florida.
I love these kids. Tremendous athletes, multi-sport athletes. For all you kids out there that want to concentrate on just lacrosse, it's not going to cut it. You want to be a multi-sport athlete, get the toughness from football, hand-eye coordination from hockey, full field running ability from soccer.
That's a crease violation, turnover against Johns Hopkins. Blue Jays, unforced error again, give it right back to Maryland. 6-2 lead for the Terps, but Johns Hopkins has just not looked sharp. 7 turnovers now for the Blue Jays.
They're a team, when they're hitting on all cylinders, efficiency is their staple.
So here's Maryland in transition again. John Haas brings it into the box. Haas runs with the first midfield line. And those midfield lines have been blurred for Maryland this year because, in part because of injuries, guys like Eric Boyle and Dan Burns, hasn't been real clear delineations between the first, second, and third midfields. Snyder off a good pick play. Bernhardt looks free again. Bassett able to go down and get it. 3rd save for Pierce Bassett.
Now, we mentioned Johns Hopkins offensive midfield. The Terps right now, all 6 of their goals from non-attack players.
Blue Jays turn it over again. Maryland gives it right back. Jake Bernhardt's pass is picked off. Castronova gets the takeaway. Ranigan charging hard. Amato with a stick save. Amato comes out of the cage to scoop it. 3rd save by Nico Amato, including a couple spectacular ones.
That's a big-time one right there. Ranigan throwing a whistler by Amato. The body positioning, too. You saw him cheating to that far pipe where he probably thought Ranigan would shoot. Great positioning by the freshman.
Maryland and Johns Hopkins both 8-2 on the season. Maryland, since the loss here to North Carolina, wins at Virginia, at Navy. Johns Hopkins also has a win over Virginia, who is then number 2. A win over 4th-ranked UNC. Last Friday, a victory over Albany to make it 3 straight for the Blue Jays since the double overtime loss at the Carrier Dome. Catalino's shot wide, backed up by the Terps. Chance to tell you, Warrior Classic Saturday, 3 Eastern, UMass versus Hofstra. Then 5:30, it's Rutgers and Syracuse. Warrior Classic Lacrosse, ESPNU Saturday. Catalino's shot goes off one of his teammates. Looks like that went off Owen Bly.
We'll have a big bruise there tomorrow. Catalino can shoot it high 90s. He had time and room, set his feet there.
(7-2) Maryland. Young with the feed to Cummings again.
You're a young attackman at home, and you like to feed the ball. Watch 27 in white. Spectacular passing by Ryan Young, the senior. Head up the entire time, anticipates Cummings. Scraping off the crease. And look at Cummings' patience right there. Just moving Bassett to the far pipe and sticks it to the near pipe. 23 goals and counting. Hat trick tonight. Joe Cummings, a natural goal scorer.
A player portfolio brought to you by Sector's Spiders. Hat trick for Cummings. His first goal and his third goal both assisted by Ryan Young. So the leading goal scorer for the Maryland Terrapins, now with 23 on the year after he exploded at Virginia with 4 goals, including 3 in the third quarter. The so-called natural hat trick, as he scored 3 straight in the third versus Virginia to begin his role.
So crafty, too. You look at that last goal. 95% of offensive players would have caught that, shot it right away. Bassett was on that far pipe. The awareness and ability to recognize that he has that extra second. Brilliant play by Cummings.
Johns Hopkins on the year has given up 6.5 goals per game. That's third in the nation. And yet with 3:38 to go here in the second quarter, already 7 on the board for Maryland off of 8 turnovers by Johns Hopkins. And another face-off win sets up Maryland on offense again.
And the attack hasn't even scored. We're seeing Young distribute the ball. No goals by Bly, Catalino, or Young. It's been a midfield-driven offense for the Terps.
I've heard you say, Paul, that the difference between being a good college lacrosse team and an elite national championship contender, offensive production from a pair of midfield lines.
You need the depth. And that's the thing with Maryland. They can throw so many guys at you. They don't have those ultra-elite players like a Shamel or Ramel Bratton, a Justin Turry. They have these two-way midfielders who all find ways, different weeks, to step up. Cummings, the steady force, scoring the goals.
Bassett makes that save on the running shot from Jake Bernhardt. 4 saves now for Bassett, 7 goals allowed on just 15 shots by Maryland. Excellent efficiency from the Terps.
It's time, though, now where people start recognizing Joe Cummings as one of the elite midfielders in college lacrosse. 23 goals on the season.
And John Tillman talked about the responsibilities because of the way Maryland plays transition, even for a guy like Cummings to play both ways, because sometimes in transition he's going to have to match up defensively. So even the goal scorers for Maryland in the midfield system have to go from end to end.
Like I mentioned, an attackman in high school, teammate of UVA All-American Steele Stanwyck.
Good movement from Johns Hopkins, this time down. That one appeared to be deflected by Ryan Bolander. Warden drawing the short stick from Shakespeare off of Boland. Turnover number 9 by Johns Hopkins. Coming up on the Warrior halftime report, Warrior Pro Session. It'll be Quinn with Ned Crotty talking about shooting on the run, maybe some facial hair grooming tips as well from Quint or Ned. I'll let you figure out which of those two guys is going to give you facial hair grooming tips. Plus top spring game performers on the football field and stats and highlights. All that coming up on the Warrior halftime report.
You look at Johns Hopkins, you mentioned the 9th turnover. Uncharacteristic lacrosse by the Blue Jays.
First penalty flag is down as Wharton came across the crease. And it will be a push against Maryland. It's on Michael Shakespeare. Appears to be, so an extra man apparently coming for Johns Hopkins with 49 seconds left.
I don't think Tillman is thrilled with this call. I don't like it either, to be honest with you. Steady pressure. Wharton just launches himself, falls in the crease. It should have been a crease violation.
So extra man opportunity for Johns Hopkins. 29% on the year for the Blue Jays. 11 man up goals. As the rain begins to fall before halftime here in College Park. 10 seconds on the extra man. Shot wide. Backed up by the Blue Jays.
That's one I think Wharton should can on that left side.
On the restart, last chance on the extra man. Penalties released, back to even strength. Greeley slips. Johns Hopkins takes a timeout. Just about 10 seconds remaining in the half. Well, it may turn into what we call in Texas a toad strangler after all. I mean, the rain that held off for, let's see, what do you say, Paul, about 2 hours? The tarp came off about an hour prior to game time. We played about an hour here in College Park, and now the rain is back, and it is falling steadily with 12 seconds to go before the half.
Not the type of weather if you're a shooter. Lose a lot of grip on your metal shaft. It's tough for an offensive player really to grasp conditions like this.
The Terrapin should fare well in this weather, though, I think.
He's Gore-Tex. He's Gore-Tex.
It's a 7-2 Maryland lead, and John Tillman takes a timeout. It was Johns Hopkins' timeout with 12 seconds. Now John Tillman takes a timeout. Of the 7 Maryland goals, all 7 from the midfield, 3 of those from Joe Cummings, the junior from Towson, Maryland, Loyola Bakersfield.
Big game, Joe. Just been brilliant all evening. Shot selection, placement. Those are his signatures. You look at that patience, too. 23 and counting for the junior midfielder. The natural goal scorer, Cummings.
And again, all 7 of those goals from the Maryland midfield. 8 Johns Hopkins turnovers and a 5-goal Terp lead.
A little bit of a chess match. You saw Coach Petramala. Coach Benson wanted to get an offensive play lined up. Maryland saw what the Jays were doing, wanted to counter.
Amato gets the save, his 5th, and another Johns Hopkins turnover sends us to halftime. Maryland 7, Johns Hopkins 2 at the break here in College Park. Amato makes 5 saves, 3 goals from Joe Cummings. And it's the Terps by 5 at the break on Johns Hopkins. As we send you to the studio, Lowell Galindo. Halftime between Johns Hopkins and Maryland here at Byrd Stadium. So time for this week's Warrior Procession with Quint Kesnick.
This halftime report is presented by Warrior. All hail. And now, a Warrior Procession with Quint Kesnick.
The pros make it look easy, but shooting on the run is one of the more difficult skills to master. It's an essential skill for offensive players to run past your defenseman and fire a laser at the goal before the defense reacts. Great players make it look easy. Shot velocity comes from an efficiency of motion, torque, hip and shoulder turn. Reach back and let the shots fly. Don't leave any arrows in your quill. We are joined by Ned Crotty, former Tewaaraton Trophy winner from Duke University and current professional attackman. When you shoot on the run, it looks fluid and it looks smooth. How do you do it?
I think there's really 3 things that you need to work on. First, getting your momentum going towards the goal. Secondly, getting your hands back. And lastly, your footwork.
I think the footwork is an area that a lot of young players really struggle with. What should they emphasize?
Yeah, but when I'm setting up my dodge, what I like to do is make sure you're getting your momentum, like I said, first off, getting your momentum going towards the goal. Too often you see kids who run towards the sideline and try to shoot on goal. From there, you're going to lose a lot of accuracy, and more importantly, you're taking a lot of power off of your shot.
Where should your hips be faced and your shoulders?
Well, where you get all your power from is turning through your shot. So what you want to do is get your hands back. What this does is 2 things. It hides the ball from the goalie, and also, like I said, helps get power in your shot. So by getting your momentum going towards the goal, you're going to be running towards the sideline, but your upper body is actually going to be facing the sideline. This is where you're going to get all your power from, because when you shoot, you want to get off of that right leg and get your shoulders and your hips and your core through the shot as fast as you can.
And what should the finish look like?
And then when you finish, turn through the shot, snap your wrist, but you should turn through so hard that you actually end up facing the opposite way.
What did it look like for you when you were first starting the sport?
Not like that. I'm still working on it.
It comes down to body control, getting that weight transfer, and being focused on your footwork. And you too can shoot like Ned Pratt.
Welcome back to Old Spice ESPNU College Lacrosse. In College Park, Maryland, with the rain falling again. It's 7-2 Maryland on Johns Hopkins at the half. Carter Blackburn with Paul Carcaterra. A quick look at some first half numbers.
Things that pop out. Face-offs, Maryland being able to get the best of the senior Matt Delente, who's been spectacular all season, and then turnovers, the Jays with 9 costly turnovers.
So Maryland wins another face-off. Curtis Holmes. I mean, we've talked about the great numbers from Delente. He's the nation's leader, winning 70%. But Holmes, with the 2 face-off wings, Jesse Bernhardt and Brian Farrell, make up a face-off unit that is won over 60%. 8 of 12 now. The face-off wins today for Maryland. The clock didn't move, so we have an official timeout. So what you see on your screen right there is correct at 14:32, and now you look at the scoreboard showing 15 minutes. Clearly the third quarter did start.
Just ask Carter Blackburn.
In the first half, it was 7 midfield goals for Maryland, 3 of those from Joe Cummings.
Well, you look at his crease awareness, his ability to find his own shot. He can create it, but he also can take it from the hands of guys like feeder Ryan Young. And Nico Amato, redshirt freshman, plays like a senior. Not only does he stop the ball, so brilliant with his outlet passes, triggering that transition game for the Terps.
5 saves for Nico Amato, 2 spectacular saves. The only mark against Amato was one of those outlet passes was intercepted by Zach Palmer, and then a empty net goal. So Johns Hopkins essentially has 1 goal created by its offense today. The other goal was on the ride, intercepting the pass and then turning that into a long goal. It tells you how dominant Maryland has been in this game. Again, all 7 of the Maryland goals from the midfield. This is Grant Catalino, the senior All-American with 107 career goals. Tries behind the back. That went off the official as well as a Johns Hopkins defender.
Not a bad shot from that lower pipe area, but you have to be at least 1 or 2 more steps above goal line if you're Catalino. Wrapping it around right-handed essentially is the same as shooting with your left hand from that spot, but still just a little bit too low.
Hopkins trying to get something going on the offensive end. There it is, a bounce shot and a score. Chris Boland, the senior from Jessup, Maryland, boys Latin, has the first tally of the second half.
One of my keys, creating offense from the midfield. John Ranigan, just a physical force. Spots Boland, puts the shoulder in. You're not pushing that kid out. And then Boland, so smooth around goal line, extended. The Jays know they can crawl back in this one. 7-3, certainly not a huge deficit.
The assist goes to Ranigan, his 10th assist, 20th goal of the season for Boland, who missed almost all of 2010 with an injury. Just 2 games, 4 goals a season ago for Boland. Delente wins that face-off by himself.
You know, if Delente is going to have success tonight at the faceoff X, going to have to win it himself. If he puts it out to the wings, that's Maryland. They're just too athletic, too fast. Coach Cottle, former Maryland coach, just did a fabulous job recruiting two-way midfielders and long poles who dominate the wings in Farrell and Barnhart.
Ranigan dodging again. Ranigan loses it. Ground ball will be taken by Hopkins. Second chance for the Blue Jays. John Greeley gets the ground ball.
You know, as physical as Ranigan is, I thought he had a step on Farrell on that last possession. The last thing he needed to do was get into Farrell's body. He had the space. If he continued that dodge north-south, he would have had a shooting opportunity.
Rob Guida and the first midfield unit out there for Johns Hopkins. Ranigan stick check, lost it. Huge stick check. Schmidt gets a ground ball in midfield with the long pole setting up Catalino, and it's 8-3 Maryland. Give the assist to Brett Schmidt. Grant Catalino finishes it off. 5-goal lead again for the Terps. First goal from an attackman for Maryland.
They're fun to watch in transition. And they have the attackman to finish it off. Catalino from the long pole. Schmidt starts on the opposite side. Stick flying out. Dan Burns just playing aggressive smash mouth defense on John Ranigan. That's where it started. Catalino is where it finishes.
Goal number 108 of Grant Catalino's career. The 6th goal that he has scored in his career against Johns Hopkins, now in game number 4 of Catalino's time at Maryland against the Blue Jays. Delente wins the faceoff for Hopkins, down by 5 goals again. Nowhere to go for Delente. Has to retreat back to the defensive end for Bassett. Well, how impactful are the long poles? We talked about the two-way middies for Maryland, but Schmidt gets the assist there. We know Farrell 11 points on the year. Jesse Bernhardt, long stick midi, with the goal for Maryland today. So scoring coming from all over the Terrapin roster.
And Brett Schmidt on that last assist to Catalino. These long poles as a unit, without question, handled better than any team in the nation.
And here they are charging in again. Bernhardt with the feed that goes just wide of the cage for Scott LaRue. But another transition opportunity created from Jesse Bernhardt with the long pole.
And if you love lacrosse and the up-tempo style, when Maryland is clicking on all cylinders, they run and gun better than anyone.
So, Paul, what do you think is the biggest difference between the Maryland team that we saw 3 weeks ago losing 11-6 on this field to North Carolina than this Maryland team and the type of team that wins at Virginia and at Navy? Although Navy's a bit down this year, still a quality win.
Couldn't get their transition game going against the Tar Heels. North Carolina ran a zone defense, cut the field in half. Maryland was forced to beat Carolina 6-on-6. It didn't happen when Virginia and Johns Hopkins came to town. Different stories. They had transition, they forced tempo, they made you play them between the restraining boxes, and teams can't match up.
Catalino draws 2 defenders, but the Terps end up turning it over. ESPN News coverage of college softball tomorrow with an SEC matchup. South Carolina versus Arkansas. ESPNU, 3 Eastern time tomorrow. Here in soggy College Park, Maryland, the rain held off for about 2 hours, allowing the tarp to come off the field. The game to get underway on schedule at 8 Eastern, the 107th matchup between Johns Hopkins and Maryland, college lacrosse's most played rivalry all the way back to 1895. And it has been a dominant performance by Maryland. 8-3. It was 7-2 at the half.
You have the transition game. Hitting for the Terps and shooting 44%. Ultra efficient.
Shot missed wide by Kyle Wharton, backed up by Johns Hopkins. Wharton, the senior captain, who slumped for much of the year. 3 goals versus North Carolina, though. Palmer trying to create some space on the goal line, extended for Johns Hopkins, and now back to the inverted offense.
Looks like Hopkins trying to attack the short sticks of Maryland. It's a nice concept, but I think it has to be off of 2 or 3 quick passes. When you attack short sticks and you pull the ball out, it allows the rest of the defense to get set up. Quick slides, too predictable. Has to come off quick passes.
Wharton, good feed. Produces the goal. Wharton gets the assist. Eric Rule the goal. Hopkins back within 4.
Well, the freshman Rule injected back into the lineup after being injured. See Coach Petramala tapping him on his head. This freshman has big-time potential. He's a midfield dodger, big, strong kid. Comes across that low goal line extended. That's not his typical spot as a midfielder. Sweet shot.
Second goal for Rule on the night. Give that assist to Kyle Wharton. Off the face-off, Maryland wins it, but a turnover gives it right back to Johns Hopkins. So we'll see if the Blue Jays can whittle away at the 4-goal lead. We haven't had a chance to call Ben Smith's number much tonight for Johns Hopkins, the long stick midi for the Blue Jays, but wanted to mention while we get just a second that he played for John Tillman at Harvard. There's an Ivy League rule saying that graduate students can't play even if they have eligibility remaining, so he wrapped up his undergraduate with a year of eligibility left. John Tillman actually helped him get to Johns Hopkins, recommended him to Dave Petramala and his staff. And John Tillman really effusive in his praise of Ben Smith as a person, as a young man. Just wanted to make mention of that as a very close tie between John Tillman, the now Maryland head coach, and Ben Smith, who's in his graduate studies now at Johns Hopkins.
He told Coach Petramala, you would love the character of Smith. Type of kid who comes to practice, works hard every day, leads by example. He's a gentleman off the field as well.
Smith on the field right now on the defensive end for Johns Hopkins, wearing number 17. So right now he's matched up with Joe Cummings there out on the edge. And so you see the importance of Ben Smith to the Johns Hopkins defense. The guy who has the hat trick today draws the long pole from the midfield, and Ben Smith. Jake Bernhardt trying to create it with a dodge on the edge. Snyder draws a flag. So an extra opportunity for the Maryland offense now. Have to keep it in the box and have to keep possession. Pick play behind the cage. Cummings finds Jake Bernhardt. Shot saved by Bassett. Now the penalty will be assessed. 5th save of the night for Pierce Bassett.
Coach Petramala not happy. On the back, a slash. Looks like Chris Leitner. One minute extra man opportunity for the Terps. Leitner in the box. Petramala fuming.
Now, Maryland has not been good on the extra man this year. Just 6 for 24 on extra man situations for the Terps.
I think with some of those shooters, Catalino and Young behind. Travis Reed, though, number 2, the top middle right now. He's been injured. He's an extra man specialist. Getting him back into the lineup's huge.
Catalino takes it up top. This is Bernhardt. Now on to Young. The feed back to Catalino. Shot missed. Bassett tried to get back there and back it up. But Maryland maintains possession with about 20 seconds left on the extra man.
That's too much cushion if you're Johns Hopkins. Get out, extend on number 1. He'll let it fly.
Young feeds Bernhardt back up top to Catalino. Back to Bernhardt, shot wide, backed up again by the Terps. 5 seconds on the man up. Young will restart. Fakes the toss. Young keeps it, feeds Bernhardt now to Catalino, who leaves it wide. Had a man on the post. Shot wide. Maryland can't convert on the extra man.
He had Owen Bly on the backside, but I thought Catalino, no one on his hands or contesting him. You might think, 12, 15 yards. Tough shot, but that kid can let it rip.
Catalino has the only goal by the Maryland attack line tonight. 7 goals from the midfield, including 3 from Joe Cummings.
Hopkins midfield very quiet offensively today. Haven't heard anything out of John Greeley. Brannigan getting attention of the long pole. Number 9 in black has to assert himself and take advantage of those opportunities.
Lee Coppersmith in the second Johns Hopkins midfield line on the field. Eric Rule playing with that second midfield line. A pair of goals tonight. And this is Rule behind the cage. Checked by Dan Burns. Shot just wide from Coppersmith. Second chance. Hopkins misses, backed up by the Blue Jays.
Crafty play on the rebound by Boland. But a fabulous save by Amato. That was the move in the space Coppersmith wanted.
Another wide and errant pass by Johns Hopkins. This time, Blue Jays keep possession. Leitner came back to get it, but then he steps out. So another turnover, the 12th of the night by Johns Hopkins. Next Saturday, Old Spice College Lacrosse, the Warrior Classic, 3 Eastern. It's UMass versus Hofstra, then 5:30 Eastern, Rutgers against number 1 for now. Syracuse, the Warrior Classic Lacrosse on ESPNU Saturday. UMass and Hofstra. What do you think of that matchup?
I think a lot is going to be solved about Hofstra in terms of how good is this 11-1 team. You know, it's a squad that had big preseason hype. They lost to Delaware in early March.
Transition goal for Johns Hopkins. Chris Boland pumps it in. Blue Jays within 3. Second goal of the night from Boland.
A lot this offseason. People talked about the emergence of those freshmen a year ago, Greeley and Rannigan and Leitner and Durkin, coming back 1 year with more experience. Well, I'll tell you, having Chris Boland back in the lineup after blowing out his knee a season ago, this is the calming force the Blue Jays need. This kid is a jack of all trades on the offensive end. So smooth and smart. You see the C on his chest. He leads this squad on and off the field. Tremendous offensive player. Just gets lacrosse with his IQ.
Illegal procedure against Maryland on the faceoff. Hopkins gets it. The assist on that last goal goes to Phil Castronova, the short stick D-Mitty, who has his 3rd assist, 5th point of the season. Johns Hopkins within 3. This was a 5-goal game at the half. Blue Jays with possession, a chance to cut it to 2 despite the 12 turnovers by Johns Hopkins tonight.
They're going to look at the tape early next week, and the majority of the first 3 quarters, sloppy play has plagued them. Lack of efficiency.
Attacking again, Amato appeared to get a stick on that one and now covers it up. Blue Jays thought they had a chance at the open goal, but Amato quickly covered it up on the side of the cage. Less than 2 minutes remaining in the 3rd quarter, where Johns Hopkins has come back with 3 third-quarter goals. It was a 5-goal lead for Maryland on Johns Hopkins at the half. Carter Blackburn with Paul Carcaterra, former Syracuse All-American midfielder, for the 107th meeting on the lacrosse field between the Blue Jays and the Terrapins, a rivalry that goes back to 1895. Maryland is trying to win back-to-back meetings against Johns Hopkins for the first time since 95-96. A year ago, 1-goal win at M&T Bank Stadium, now back on campus at Byrd. Johns Hopkins has won 12 of the last 16 in this series. And again, Maryland with a chance to win back-to-back meetings with the Blue Jays for the first time in 15 years.
That's a surprising stat when you think of the success Maryland has had over the last decade plus. The Blue Jays always able to stand toe-to-toe, even in the off years for Hopkins, the past few years after that 2008 title run with Paul Rabel and Stephen Pizer. A couple of subpar years for the Blue Jays.
Last year, a losing record for Johns Hopkins for the first time since 1972. Bassett goes up high to make that save. 6th of the night, and now Johns Hopkins in transition again. Blue Jays pushing, shooting, saved by Nico Amato. But off the rebound, Hopkins pumps it in. We got a 2-goal game with 10 seconds left in the 3rd, and the 3rd quarter belongs to the Blue Jays.
I mentioned the awareness, lacrosse IQ of Chris Boland. We'll take a look at the replay. Rannigan in transition. Not the shot he wants or that will beat Amato. And Boland just heads up. I thought maybe interference if he touched his stick. I don't think he did. All ball right there. Wow.
What a terrific play by Bolin to get in Amato's face, pick it off, and pump it home. Wharton was right there with him as well, so give the unofficial assist to Kyle Wharton on that one with a stick in Amato's face. Another face-off win by Delente, and Hopkins will go to the fourth quarter in what is now a 2-goal game. It was all Maryland at the half. But in the third quarter, 4 goals, 3 of them from the senior from Jessup, Maryland, Chris Bolin. He has a hat trick in the third quarter. And we go to the fourth, meeting number 107. It's a 2-goal game. Take a look at our Old Spice game track as we go to the fourth, and you see with that explosion by Johns Hopkins and especially Chris Bolin in the third, we got a good one.
Joe Cummings leading all Terp scorers, but Chris Bolin matching his 3 goals. And over the course of the last quarter, Hopkins starting to get some offense. First half, 11 shots total. Third quarter, they matched that.
Only 2 goals in the first half by Johns Hopkins, and as we mentioned earlier, one of those was directly off of a Nico Amato errant transition pass, outlet pass. So really only 1 goal created by the offense in the first half by Johns Hopkins, marred by turnovers. Third quarter, that changed, but it's Maryland getting started in transition in the fourth. Bassett goes down low to make that save on Ryan Young, and Pierce Bassett appears to be getting in an excellent rhythm in the cage for Johns Hopkins.
7th save for Bassett. Now, he's a type of goalie, does it quietly. Great positioning. I mentioned in the open, even-keeled, poised. Not a rah-rah type goaltender. Cannot dispute the results of 33 in black.
In fact, what did Dave Petromal say watching game film from the North Carolina win as soon as that dramatic game goes final? Pierce Bassett turns, picks up his water bottle, jogs back to the sideline. No fist pumping. Big celebration. Well, we got a 1-goal game. Kyle Wharton, the senior captain from the goal line extended, makes this 8-7.
Well, this is one of John Greeley's strong suits. Number 9, I mentioned he had to step up. This is a brilliant feed. Cross crease, and that's where 42 in black makes his living. Camped out, time room, snipe.
Johns Hopkins has outscored Maryland 5-1 in the second half. A procedure against Johns Hopkins. Maryland ball. Bernhardt's pass goes wide. Maryland can't save it. Johns Hopkins ball.
That last goal by Wharton. He does that better than anyone. The only problem is the opposition knows that, so you don't see him getting those opportunities.
Wharton gets that last goal for Johns Hopkins. Now, I know, Clark, your spring of your senior year, you were in the library in the lacrosse field. That's John Aston, the actor on the left. You might say, why are we showing you John Aston? And yes, if you say Gomez from the Adams family. Kyle Wharton using his final semester of college to branch out a little bit. Contemporary theater and film. The professor in the class, John Aston, the actor who played Gomez on the Adams Family TV series.
That's your cup of tea.
I was impressed when Kyle said, yeah, he played Gomez in the Adams Family. I was impressed that Kyle knew what the original Adams Family was, not just the movies with Angelica Houston and Christina Ricci. I mean, the original Adams Family.
Well, when you're taking those types of courses, got to go back into the archives.
Always good when you can incorporate imdb.com into your game research. I'm always encouraged to do that.
What kind of professor is he? Did he mention?
Oh, yes, it was great. Great class. I don't think Kyle is the only member of the Blue Jays lacrosse program who was being challenged by contemporary theater and film in the spring of their senior years. I know you were straight from Byrd Library at Syracuse to the lacrosse field in the spring of your senior year.
Getting after it. Hitting the books hard. Keeping mom and dad proud.
Kyle is a political science major, by the way, has an interest in politics.
Looks right now, Maryland potentially in a zone.
We're even. Boland has his 4th goal of the game from 5 goals down at the half, tied at 8. Well, meeting number 107 between Johns Hopkins and Maryland is turning into another good one.
I can't say enough about Chris Boland. This shot is ridiculous. If you look at the lack of angle, 4th goal tonight, single-handedly putting the Jays back in this contest. Maryland goes in a zone, quick ball movement, the fadeaway, sticks it. Near pipe on Amato. Unbelievable shot by Wharton. Or Boland, for that matter, so red hot. Back-to-back goals by the seniors. Wharton, now Boland. The Jays crawled back in this game. I thought at 7-3, the way the tempo was, they had an opportunity. They have the young bucks, but it's been their senior leaders who have been the difference in the second half.
First time we've been tied in this game. It was a 4-1 start for Maryland, led 7-2 at the half. Since then, Johns Hopkins has evened it up.
Now that last goal by Boland, I think Amato, when he watches film, is going to be upset that he wasn't hugging the pipe, but I think he was anticipating Boland to come up a little bit higher and probably shoot to the offside of Amato. That left side, but he just squeezed that one in. No margin for error. And the senior just sticks it home.
Maryland's gone nearly 16 minutes without a goal. Good ball movement here to get the look and the score from Jake Bernhardt. Second goal of the night for Jake Bernhardt. Maryland back on top.
Big time answer goal for the Terps. You look at their big goal scorers, their quarterback Ryan Young, Catalino the sniper, Joe Cummings with a great initiation off to the backside, and Barnhart, him and his brother Jesse with the long pole. I was mentioning all the big pieces back for Maryland, those vaunted attackmen. I think the Barnharts are the engine of this Maryland team.
3 goals for the Barnhart brothers tonight. 2 from Jake, 1 from Jesse. Fight for this face-off won by Galente and the Johns Hopkins unit. 16 minutes and 15 seconds between goals for Maryland, between the Catalino goal that made it 8-3 and then Jake Bernhardt's second goal of the night to put the Terps back up.
And on that last goal, you saw Cummings start with the ball, so much attention on him. He had the awareness to get his separation, kick it behind. The defense needed to rotate. Owen Bly with a great feed to Barnhart.
Guida, Greeley, and Rannigan, the first midfield unit, back on the field for Johns Hopkins. Gordon takes it behind the cage. He's checked by the short stick Burns. Gordon.
You know, the Terps have really done a fine job clamping down on 31 in black. John Rannigan, the sophomore midfielder, came in red hot and having trouble tonight getting separation from the Maryland defense.
No goals, 1 assist for Rannigan tonight. Zero angle shot goes wide from Boland. ESPN News coverage of college softball continues tomorrow. SEC matchup with Arkansas versus South Carolina at 3 Eastern on Sunday. Burns comes back to the Maryland sideline. Appears to be cramping up with 8:57 to go in the fourth. One-goal game right now in the fourth, and how about that one behind the back from Zach Palmer? Woo! The whip shot behind the back. We're even again at 9.
Are you kidding me? Look at this shot. Unbelievable. The sophomore Canadian just snipes this behind the back.
Behind the back in a hurry.
Can you say Sports Center? Top shelf on a motto. Look at this shot. With pressure on. You look at the type of kids that can do this. It's the Canadians who have that box lacrosse background. Wow.
Tying it at 9 with some sizzle. Second goal for Palmer to go with an assist. Wharton gets the assist on that one as well. So Wharton has a goal and 2 assists. Palmer has the tying goal, his second of the night, and he has the highlight of the night.
In the awareness, he had pressure on his top side, his left hand. He had nowhere to go with it. So he goes behind the back, backhand, like shooting right-handed to the opposite side where the pressure wasn't. Unbelievable. I mean, that is about as sick as a shot as you're going to see. And I mentioned the Canadian box background. Those players are accustomed to playing in tight quarters.
I talked about the explosive offense from Palmer as a sophomore. Played a lot in the midfield lines for Johns Hopkins last year, but with a pair of goals and an assist tonight for Palmer. He has 32 points on the season as a sophomore, split almost evenly between goals and assists. You see those big goals now for Palmer. Big numbers now for Palmer. And Johns Hopkins takes the lead. First lead of the night for the Blue Jays. From 5 goals down at the half, Johns Hopkins has the lead with less than 8 to go in regulation.
I mean, at 7-3, they had every right to start feeling that this game was slipping away on the road at Byrd Stadium. Marshall Burkhart, the junior midfielder, great crease cut, sticks it past Amato.
Rule gets the assist. Johns Hopkins leads for the first time tonight. Well, it's 10-9 Johns Hopkins. Let's go back to goal number 9. Replay the reverse. Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. We're just up the road in College Park, Maryland, for the 107th meeting between Johns Hopkins and Maryland on the lacrosse field. Got a 1-goal game. And guess what happened last year when these teams got together? M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, home of the Ravens. It was a 4-1 start for Johns Hopkins, but Maryland coming back to win it 10-9. Grant Catalina with a pair of goals for the Terps. Ryan Young assisting on that Grant Catalino goal. And another 1-goal win, just as 3 of the last 4 matchups between these two have been. An opportunity tonight for Maryland to beat Johns Hopkins for the 2nd straight year. For the first time since 95 and 96, and yet Johns Hopkins outscoring Maryland 8-2 in the second half, nearly 9-2 as that bounce shot from Delente off of the face-off win nearly went home.
Been a tale of 2 halves for the Blue Jay offense. Miserable shooting in the first half, 2 of 11, 18%. Second half, canning 47% of their shots. Also impressed with Coach Petramala and Coach Dwan and Benson, keeping this group even-keeled and not letting the moment take over. This is a young squad, but they're showing tremendous maturity.
Rannigan takes a huge check. Jesse Bernhardt lays it on Rannigan. Guida dodges. Checked out of there by Bolander. Warden able to recover. Big check on Boland coming from Brett Schmidt, and the Maryland defense is playing with a new intensity on this possession for Johns Hopkins. Stall warning issued.
Maryland defense. It's always been a signature of the way the Terps have played. They're honoring the 1973 championship team. Big Ed Glatzel, an All-American on that squad. He led the Terps, and then in the 80s they had guys like Dan Tracy and Bill Ralph. The legacy of defenders just continued for Maryland with that thump. Whoa!
Big time check in midfield. I couldn't see who laid it, but it was a good one. Rannigan feeding the post, and Johns Hopkins leads it by 2. Boland has another goal. His 5th of the night. It was Maryland transition. Hopkins brings it back and scores to make it a 2-goal Johns Hopkins lead.
Now, I was mentioning some great Maryland defenders. This reminds me of an old school Hopkins hit by Rob Dorr. First team All-American in 1999. You see Leitner just laying the boom. Guido with the awareness. Upfield to John Greeley, classmate Rannigan, and the man who's been getting it done all afternoon, Chris Boland. A hit like that is pure energy.
It begins with the Leitner huge pop. So Leitner dislodges it, sending Johns Hopkins back in transition. Boland has his 5th goal of the night. Assist goes to Rannigan, his 2nd. 5 goals on 8 shots this quarter for Johns Hopkins. From 5 down at the half, the Blue Jays have a 2-goal advantage on Maryland with 5.5 to go. Keep in mind, Johns Hopkins, 9 straight games when trailing at the half they had lost. So it's been a while since this team has been able to overcome a halftime deficit, not only trailing at the half, down by 5, and really dominated by Maryland in the first half of play. And the Blue Jays have flipped the script here in the second half, outscoring Maryland 9-2 in the 3rd and 4th quarters so far.
And from an emotion standpoint, that first half, they looked dead. No energy on the bench, and second half just flying, hitting on all cylinders, the Blue Jays.
Owen Bly puts a good dodge on. Young's pass goes wide. Big ground ball battle at midfield. It's going to roll towards Amato and Cage. Offsides against Hopkins. Maryland's going to get it back.
No possession, so no penalty for the Blue Jays. The Terps get another crack at it.
Cummings pass just wide. Jake Bernhardt and the first midfield unit out there for Maryland.
This is the guy who's been getting it done for Maryland, Joe Cummings, starting the offense, but sense of urgency, it's now for the Terps. Plenty of time, but I think you're going to look back. This possession most likely will dictate.
Well, and who do you go to but Ryan Young, the guy that John Tillman says is the heartbeat of the team. Senior captain from Manhasset comes up with a big one for Maryland.
When you're a senior captain and it's Hopkins, Maryland, you know it's time to hit the gas pedal. Ryan Young, known as a feeder, but also a very accurate shooter, 47% on the season, just sticks it past Bassett. You saw the burst, too. The burst gave him the separation.
Three points tonight for Ryan Young, a pair of assists, 1 goal, 14 goals this season. And here comes maybe the biggest face-off of the night. Holmes and Delente battle for it. No whistle. Maryland takes the face-off. An opportunity for the Terps to tie with 3.5 to go in regulation.
What a game. And when you thought one team was dead, they have an answer. It's been the seniors in this fourth quarter. We saw Boland. Just saw Young. This rivalry, unless you're putting on a Terp or Hopkins jersey, you don't realize the magnitude. When you speak to the alumni, without question, it's the biggest game of the season.
And here's Young dodging again for the Terps. Meeting number 107 in college lacrosse's most played rivalry, all the way back to 1895. Maryland trying to win back-to-back meetings with Hopkins for the first time since 95-96. Cummings dodges, shoots low, and scores for Maryland. We're even again. Cummings had 3 in the first half. This is the 4th goal of the game, the first in the second half. Hopkins builds a lead, and Maryland evens it just like the Blue Jays did to the Terps.
Silky smooth Joe Cummings. What a great move. Little inside roll. Now he fights to get upfield, takes the extra step. The bench, tying goal. Joe Cummings. What is impressing me more than anything about Joe Cummings is taking that extra step. Most players, they get the separation, they prematurely shoot. Cummings, his crease awareness is spectacular.
The question at the beginning of the night was, when is this game going to begin? With the rain and thunderstorms, we weren't sure it was going to be 8, 8:30, 10 o'clock at night. Now the question is, when will this game end? 2:30 left to go in regulation. But both teams have showed the ability to come from behind and come up with critical goals. Johns Hopkins trailed by 5 at the half. Rallied to take a 2-goal lead. Back-to-back goals by Maryland in the closing minutes make this a critical penalty with 2:11 to go in a tie game.
They're going to get Landon Carr on a push with possession. 30 seconds. The ref might have called that a 1 minute. And if he did, I don't know why. That's a push. What else can you possibly call? Maybe a cross-check? But too tight, if you ask me. That's a push with possession.
So Johns Hopkins is going to go on the extra man. Blue Jays 11 man-up goals this season. So now it is 30 seconds. So the Back to exactly what you said, Paul. 30-second man-up opportunity for the Blue Jays.
They got it right. If you're Maryland, you have to watch the shooters. 42 in black and 32.
Switch play at the top, trying to set up Goodrich on the post. Whose possession? Whose possession with 8 seconds left on the extra man?
Closest to the ball when it goes out of bounds.
Well, Maryland thought they had it on the backup.
From up here, that looked like Maryland was closer to the ball when it went out of bounds.
So perhaps a break for Johns Hopkins. Now can the Blue Jays capitalize with seconds remaining on the extra man? Another turnover by the Blue Jays. The penalties released. We're here to
take a look at this last possession. Goodrich fires. Oh, without question. That should have been white ball.
Yep, Brett Schmidt was clearly there. You saw the stick way out there. It should have been Maryland ball. So Johns Hopkins gets possession, but then turns it over for the 15th time tonight. A minute 38 left, Maryland ball. Terps have scored on their last 4 shots.
Maryland, I want it in 27 stick or 19.
LaRue is tripped, no call. Now here it comes. Now, LaRue had possession of that ball. They're saying loose ball.
How are they calling that a loose ball? LaRue got up from the push with the ball in his cross.
So no penalty because that's called a loose ball. Still Maryland ball, just over a minute to go in regulation. This is Young behind the cage. Young, the senior captain, guiding the Maryland offense. Keep an eye on number 1. Grant Catalino setting up about 10 yards in front of the cage.
You look at Maryland inside, there'll be a lot of picking between number 1 Catalino and 19 Cummings. Look for them off of a Young feed.
Young dodges. Young feeds. Pass wide, scooped up by Bernhardt. 15 seconds left. Back in the stick of Ryan Young. Behind the cage. Young feeds Bly.
Looks like potentially a moving pick. Something on the inside against Maryland. Hopkins possession.
With 8 seconds left. Well, this is where you wish we had explanations in game from the officials, because that's exactly what the call appeared to be. But there have been some big ones down the stretch.
If I'm Coach Tillman, I'm still upset. Scott LaRue should have been a penalty.
In which case it would have been extra man for Maryland.
The big scoring opportunity. They called it a loose ball push. I don't get the loose part of that. The ball was in possession the entire time.
Which may be the discussion right here. But the result of the last series is 8 seconds to go in the 4th in regulation, tie game, and it's going to be Johns Hopkins ball. So this is a Maryland timeout. Let's go back to that last offensive possession by Maryland. We're looking for what the call would have been that would have given possession back to Johns Hopkins. Timeout Hopkins. 7. So again, 7 seconds on the restart. Hopkins ball. Back to Bassett out of goal. Confusion in front of the cage. Loose ball scooped up by Maryland. Bolander has it. We're headed to overtime between Maryland and Johns Hopkins. A game that appeared to be all Maryland in the first half, then all Johns Hopkins in the second half. The question is, now we go to overtime. It's tied. Who carries momentum into overtime for a big win? In overtime, sudden victory, meaning that the first goal wins. Johns Hopkins played a double overtime game at the Carrier Dome on March 19th, a game that they lost 5-4. This is the first overtime game of the season for the Maryland Terrapins. Again, the fourth time since 2002 that we've gone to overtime in Maryland versus Johns Hopkins. Hopkins won in 07 in overtime on this field. Hopkins won at Homewood in 02 in overtime, and 03 here at Byrd Stadium in overtime. Ryan Young will once again set the Maryland offense behind the cage, working off the pick from Cummings, who has 4 goals in the game. 3 in the first half for Cummings, and then his 4th tied it at 11. Young checked by Durkin behind the cage. Good feed off the pipe. Cummings' shot goes off the pipe. Maryland maintains possession.
That's the look the Terps wanted. The feeder Young gets Bassett, just stings the pipe. Exactly where you want to put it if you're Cummings. Got Bassett to commit low, stung it high, but rung that crossbar.
Young off the pick again from Cummings, so a 2-man game now between Young and Cummings. Cummings feeds, another good look. What a save by Bassett! A stone save by Bassett keeps it tied at 11.
Wow, Pierce Bassett coming up huge time after time this season for the Blue Jays.
Timeout, Johns Hopkins. What a save by Bassett, 8th of the night, by far the most spectacular.
Bernhardt does a great job, actually has to shovel that shot with the pressure from Hopkins. But Bassett just does a fabulous job reading sticks on stick. Big time save for 33 in black.
In overtime between Johns Hopkins and Maryland, sudden victory. You have 4-minute periods until a team scores with that 2-minute intermission. And again, Johns Hopkins has already played a double overtime game, a loss at Syracuse, 5-4. So a little more thrilling, a little higher scoring in this matchup between Johns Hopkins and Maryland.
This is the type of game you want if you're a lacrosse fan. 11-11, you get into double digits. We've had transition, some great creative offensive plays. You look at that Palmer goal. That might be the goal of the year. Sophomore attackman from Canada.
Well, we're not done with lacrosse, but we're ready to name our player of the game, brought to you by Maverick. It is Chris Boland with 5 goals, all in the second half, leading the Johns Hopkins offensive explosion.
Flip a coin between Boland and the junior Joe Cummings for Maryland, 19 in white. Both have taken over this game offensively.
Boland's career high is actually 6 goals. He did that in a game a couple of years ago against Virginia. If he gets to goal number 6, Johns Hopkins wins. That shot just wide from John Greeley.
I thought Rannigan should have shot that one. Had the separation, had space. Dished it off. It was a nice feed. But when you have your hands free in overtime, let it rip, young fellow.
Boland sets the pick behind the cage. Now whip it around to Wharton. Wharton gets a step, leaves it just wide. Backed up by Boland.
Wharton, the big lefty shooter. let go right-handed on that one.
Boland gets it restarted behind the cage. It's the first midfield line. Rannigan, Greeley, and Guida on the field for Johns Hopkins. Here's Guida on the dodge. Gets a step, but slips. And a flag coming against Maryland. Extra man opportunity in overtime for Johns Hopkins with 1:17 left in the first overtime. That's a 1-minute slash on Bolander. 1 minute extra man for Johns Hopkins with 1:17 roughly to go in OT.
Here's a replay. They got Bolander on that initial check. Guida falls, and it's a good call by the refs.
Neither team has an extra man goal today. Johns Hopkins 0 for 2, Maryland 0 for 1. Timeout for Maryland to set up the man-down defense.
Man in the blue hat, Bobby Benson, offensive coordinator for the Blue Jays, trying to muster up man advantage play. You have to test the motto. Get after it right now. 1:17 left. You have a minute penalty. Every opportunity for a few shots.
Doubleheader Saturday next week. The Warrior Classic, 3 Eastern. It's 8th-ranked Hofstra, one of the nation's top goalies, Micah Boston against UMass. A triple overtime winner today, UMass. Then 5:30 Eastern, Rutgers versus Syracuse. The Warrior Classic Lacrosse on ESPNU Saturday. Great battle here in College Park between two of the top 5 teams in college lacrosse. Hopkins and Maryland. You see Syracuse still number 1.
They won't be come Monday. That will go to Notre Dame
because of the loss earlier in the week to Cornell, and a dominating win by Cornell.
Cornell looked fabulous, and Rob Pennell in that contest, the junior attackman, hand him the Tewaaraton Trophy. He's the best player in America, and the second one isn't even close right now. It's a runaway for Pennell, the junior attackman, up in Ithaca, New York. He's doing more for a team than any player I can remember since 2004, Mikey Powell and that Syracuse team.
Leading Syracuse to the championship that year. The next year was Johns Hopkins winning it in 2005 with the senior team. Carter Blackburn with Paul Carcaterra on a soggy night in College Park, Maryland. A 1-minute extra man in overtime for Johns Hopkins. This Johns Hopkins extra man unit, 11 goals on the season, 29%.
You know, Maryland's going to play Wharton 42 as the shooter, but watch Boland. He's been great on the extra man on the low angles.
And in front of the cage, it's Brandon Benn, the freshman from Ontario, extra man specialist. Right at the top of the crease. That shot deflected off of Dan Burns on the shot from Wharton, backed up by Hopkins.
Hopkins has multiple formations right now. Boland up at the point of that offense, directing the extra man unit.
27 seconds left on the extra man. You see the game clock rolling near 40 seconds in this first overtime. Nearing 10 seconds left in the extra man. That pass is deflected, disrupting the Johns Hopkins offense, and now seconds away. And in fact, penalty is released. We're back to even strength. Wharton winds and fires, and Johns Hopkins wins it. With 16 seconds left in overtime, Kyle Wharton rifles the shot home just as the penalty's released. And Johns Hopkins, from 5 goals down at the half, comes back to beat Maryland in overtime. College lacrosse's oldest rivalry has a classic in 2011. An overtime win for the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays at Maryland.
Petramala knows what it means for his program. The seniors, Boland and Wharton, incredible down the stretch. And this was vintage Kyle Wharton. here. He just does a fabulous job right here. You see that freeze. He gets the defense to commit. They think that's when he's shooting, loses it, gets his hands free, and look at that shot. You see the water spraying off the back of the net with that rip. Fakes the shot, gets the defense to commit. It's all over. 42, the hero in black.
And what a fitting end to this rainy night. Wharton Wines fires. And those rain droplets flying off the back of the net as Johns Hopkins with a tremendous come-from-behind win.
Unbelievable game. You think of the Baby Jays, I mentioned 8 out of 10 starters, freshmen or sophomores, but it was their seniors who delivered for them. All championship teams have leadership. The seniors who can win these type of games. Chris Boland right there. Kyle Wharton with the game winner. Incredible.
Johns Hopkins goes to 9-2. The Blue Jays have now won 4 straight. They've beaten second-ranked Virginia, 4th-ranked North Carolina, and now another win over a top 4 team, 12-11. Johns Hopkins comes down from 5 at the half to win it in OT, 12-11. For Paul Carcaterra and our entire crew, I'm Carter Blackburn. This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports. Meeting number 107 between Johns Hopkins and Maryland goes to the Blue Jays in OT.